let me see how the, sounds like it's getting to the back of the room. How many folks here were on my talk on Friday? Okay, they know. The other folks, if you don't know, if you want one of these, I throw them out during the talk. The caveat is that I have a bad arm, my accuracy is poor, and you're more likely to get one the closer you sit to the front of the room. So if you're really, really, really wanting one of these, be proactive and move forward. Let's see, I think I have a minute to go. Before I start, Hans had a similar session on Friday, very, very good. And he said he thought of me as a DBA, which shocked the you-know-what out of me. I started off on what they called mini computers, and then moved into the Digital Equipment Corporation's brand of computers, the DEC top 10, top 20 realm, then into PDP-11s, PDP-10s, VAXs, and unfortunately, whenever I really got really good at an operating system, they'd kill off the operating system. So I moved to this other operating system called Unix that they promised me that no one really owned, so it couldn't be killed off. And as in my 20s, thinking that they had an operating system they couldn't kill off, so much the better. And then I heard about this crazy guy from Finland who was kind of doing an end around about the Minix operating system, and he was calling it Linux, and his name is Linus, and hey, it's kind of like Unix, and it got that way. And then many years later, I was working in a shop where we needed to put some stuff in a database, and it was a very small shop, and like many of you, it's like, hey, we need it in a database, guess what? You get to put it into the database. So that's how I started becoming a DBA. So this talk, and I've given variations of this at this event in the past, is for folks who are Linux or Unix admins who find themselves being tasked to keep care of databases. If you're not in that group, I'll try to get you along. So if you're in that group, I have some great suggestions for you. Unfortunately, I'm talking about some of the products that are coming up. Oracle doesn't like employees talking about products that don't have a price and a stock keeping unit on them yet. To get around that, legally I have to say, please abide by the Safe Harbor Agreement, which legally means anything I say right now, take with a grain of salt if it's not for an officially generally available piece of software. And there's Hans coming in. Let's give him a round of applause as he comes in. If you don't know MySQL, we've been around for 20 years. The InnoDB storage engine has been around for 10 years. And Oracle's had ownership of MySQL for 5 years. And at various events like FOSDEM here, we are having cake. Unfortunately, cake for 2,000 people is a little prohibitive for me on my budget right now. So that's the closest you're going to get to cake. So what are databases? Well, from the sysadmin view, they're a mess. They're selfish. They want everything all themselves all the time. They're messy. They like memory. They like to suck up memory. They like to suck up disk space. They suck up log space. They suck up bandwidth on the network. They just kind of suck up everything. On top of that, they're growing all the time, and no one ever says, damn it, the database is too fast. Slow it down. So that's the way things turn out. Databases end up sucking up a good part of your life. In short, databases are nasty toddlers. And that's probably the view of most of you in here. Those folks of you who don't really have DBA skills, but it's part of your duties. And your bosses figure, well, we'll just add that to all the free time they do, because all they do is sit at their desk and look at the computer screen. So that's what your boss actually thinks between rounds of golf and going to the yacht club. So how do you have a happy database? For hardware, there was a wonderful talk yesterday by Bruce Momgen. If you missed it, please go back and review it. He talked about setting up hardware for databases. Pay particular attention to what he did when he talked about setting up disk caches and disk drives and solid-state drives and some of the newer devices. So today we're going to talk a little bit about hardware, software, backups and replication, which I kind of view together. I'm going to mention some tools to make your life easier. You probably have your own cache of tools, and some configuration suggestions, and then we'll go into a Q&A. So, first thing, if you have more hardware money sitting around, what do databases love above all else? Memory. Spend money on good memory. Get the good ECC stuff. Buy lots of it. Monitor it. Pay attention to the error messages. This is more important than going out and buying the greatest and latest core. Why memory? Well, if I have to read a piece of information off a disk, it's going to take 100,000 times more effort than it does to take it out of memory. And you can see there that if you start doing 1 instance up a second, we can come back late tomorrow and see you finish the last 100,000 of them. So I'm trying to give you an idea of the scale here of what's involved. Disks or disk-like things. You are about to get a big revolution. The two revolutions right now is that we used to have servers that we treated like pets. We came up with cute names for them. Now we're treating them like cattle. They have a serial number for a name. The second revolution is disk devices, or what we consider disk devices. Used to be you had two choices, a fairly fast disk drive or a little bit cheaper disk drive. That's going away. I was talking to the folks at a lot of the data storage companies and saying, what are we going to be hanging off our boxes in 5 years? And they say, well, there's going to be a few legacy spinny thingies, and then you're going to have some flash memory thingies, and then some other memory things, and maybe combinations of those. But in 5 years, we have no idea what's going there because it's all changing. I'll talk about Fusion I/O cards in a little bit. If you're logging stuff on your databases, binary log for replication, or general log to see what's going on, do not put them on slow devices. They'll end up slowing things down. RAID to your favorite level, and hopefully your favorite level is 10 or above. Bruce talked about why RAID 5 kind of stinks because there's some interruptions there. Other thing is, do not use consumer-grade disks. It's very attractive to go to Fry's and get that 1 terabyte drive for 20 bucks with the Friday coupon. It's great for your laptop. It's great for your sister's email system. It is not great for 724's 365 production. Once again, caches. Refer to Bruce's talk. He went through that very good. There's things called write-through caches or write-back caches. The idea of a write-through cache is that you send the data to the disk drive. Until it gets written to the disk drive, it doesn't release the process to go back and continue on its merry way. Then there's write-back that says, yeah, I'll go write it, and you can go back on your merry way. Both those types of caches will lie to you on occasion, so don't trust them. Work with your manufacturer's recommendations to see what goes on. Fusion I/O cards. This is going to be a big revolution in the MySQL and probably other database worlds. Databases use a cost-based optimizer. The idea is that the most expensive thing in an operation for a database is reading off disk. Well, what if you suddenly reduce that cost down to 0? You're trying to do a divide by 0. The Fusion I/O cards are atomic writes, which means you want it written, it's there. We don't have to double buffer to make sure if something goes wrong. It will stay around in case of a crash. With these cards, turn off double buffering automatically with MySQL 5.7, and therefore you get a lot more speed. So if you're I/O bound, start looking at these cards. Network. General warning is never expose your database to the internet unless you plan to rebuild it on a frequent basis. Any data that comes from the outside world that you're going to store in a database, and pound this into your programmers. Scrub rigorously. Cross-scripting stuff is getting rarer and rarer, but the attempts are getting harder and harder. So tell your folks, make sure if you're putting an integer in there that's really an integer. Make sure there's nothing in that string that will come back and bite you. The old XKCD cartoon of Little Bobby drop tables should come to mind. I highly recommend keeping a separate network for replication and or backup for your servers. Why? Replication can be rather verbose. Backups, you always need extra bandwidth. So spend a little extra money and set up a separate network. Big recommendation, go out and read the MySQL manual on user authentication. It's not as sophisticated as you would have hoped. Basically, it comes in and sees your connection and says, okay, what host are they coming from? Oh, that host is in my whitelist, I'll let them in. Then we're going to check the username and password. The only trouble is you can have various combinations of stuff, and the first good one that it matches lets it through. Good example is that your boss at home may have different permissions because they're coming in from work. So your boss is trying to do the performance review at home on a Friday night because he's tired and wants to spend some time with the family, starts trying to work, can't get into the data that he wants because he's at home instead of at work. It's going to affect your performance review. I'll mention this now, I'll also mention it later. If you're authenticating by host name, please turn that off. One of these days you're going to have a bad zone transfer, and we do have a switch that says just authenticate by IP address. If you don't have that, and your DNS times out and times out and times out, suddenly you have all these connections pending that never get through, and things slow down. And damn it, the database is slow. Well, it's not the database. It's the network. It's the DNS server. But who gets the blame?
We do solve that by running local bind instances.
Local bind instance? That works well for you? Okay.
Works well because we're using DNS for failover,
Mm-hmm.
and so we kind of tie to, do we do the monkey dance, or do we let DNS do it, and we run a local bind instance, because those upstream for DNS are not reliable.
Okay. So Derhans is running local DNS to the box to make sure that it doesn't have to go traipsing over the network to figure out who .com is.
And then monitor bind.
And then monitor bind, yes. Software. If you can possibly run the latest and greatest of the generally available version of MySQL, please do it. It's has better performance, has a lot of bug fixes, has a lot of features, and it's better code. For those who are on 5.1, you're about to get swooped down because 5.7 is coming later this year. 5.5, you're doing okay. 5.6, you're doing great. Big hint, databases do not play well with others. If you can, if you're a very small shop and you have your web server and your DNS and your LDAP and all that, and there's not a lot of contention on the box, it's okay to keep a lot of stuff on there. If you're a data professional and your paycheck somehow depends on that database, you need to escalate your game. You need to put the database on a separate box. If it starts contending for resources and starts swapping, you're going to be in trouble. Things go badly, badly, badly downhill from there. Maybe a caching layer, but please watch your memory consumption. Backups and replications. On Friday we heard, do backups, do replications. I generally recommend that you do backups until they're almost painful. You're never going to get fired for having too many backups. Repeat, you will not get fired for having too many backups. Paranoia is your friend. The other thing is a backup that you can't use or no one else other than you knows how to use to restore a complete server, just a database, or just a table is useless. You have to know how to do all those things and make sure other people in your shop can do those things. Otherwise, you will never have a vacation, you will never have promotion, you'll never have a life, period. Off-site backups. Make sure there's multiple people who know where they are and can get them. By the way, many years ago, some friends of mine had their backups with a very well-known company for doing backup storage, and the Northridge earthquake hit, and all their data tapes were in Northridge, and they couldn't get to them for 3 weeks and couldn't restore their business. So, once again, paranoia is your friend. MySQL replication has been around since version 3. It's fairly simple. We've improved it a lot over the years. And basically, there's two types of replication. Oh, by the way, on backups, it's either serializing your data or taking a snapshot of your data, like an LVM snapshot or a MySQL dump or Percona extra backup. Do both. Every so often, just do an LVM snapshot if you're on LVM. Store it away. Paranoia is your friend. So replication is fairly simple. The master has a copy of the data. Slave server has a copy of the data. You make a change on the master, move it over to the slave. Slave has the same changes as the master. Everything should be equal. We offer two types. Asynchronous. The slave grabs a copy of the changes from the master and applies it to its own set. Master is totally unaware of what's going on. With 5.6, we introduced semi-synchronous replication, where at least one slave has to say, yeah, I got a copy of it. I may not have written it to disk, but I have a copy of the information. Mr. Master, you can go on about your way and do other work. If you can use semi-synchronous, I really recommend it. It is a way to make sure that your data is getting replicated. Now, out of replication, we have three forms. One is the SQL statement that runs on the master is transferred over to the slave. We also have row-based, where the outcome of that is transferred over to the slave. And by the way, with 5.6, if you're changing a 300-column table, you don't have to send all 300 columns. You can send the primary key and the columns that change. Much less stuff going through the network. We also have mixed replication, where there's some heuristics built into the server, and it knows when to go statement-based or when to go row-based. Now, something we're changing in 5.7 is you're going to have multiple threads per database for replication. 5.6, it's multiple threads, well, one thread per database possible. And before that, it was single-threaded, so you had one file for everything to go through. So if you can run 5.6 and you're replicating multiple databases, please do so. 5.7 will make your life a lot easier. So, do you have to replicate everything? No. For instance, in my lifetime, there's not been a new state added to the United States of America. So if you have something analogous to a product catalog for your company that only gets updated once a year, or a list of states, you don't have to send that over every time. Maybe just a simple backup will take care of that. Stuff that churns and is very important, like cache point of sales information, backup and replicate as much as you can. You can also filter tables. Some parts of your databases are the equivalent of the state information and don't really change. It's the stuff that's changing all the time you want to do. Now with 5.7, you can change the filters on the fly. So if something's going on in manufacturing, or you suddenly got a warning that there's going to be an audit and the financial folks want an extra copy of the data, you can change it on the fly with 5.7. Something we introduced with MySQL 5.6 was global transaction IDs. Every ID has a unique transaction. If you have a family of slave servers and you bring a new one up, it knows what GTIDs it's seen and which ones it hasn't, and it can filter that and quickly catch up. In the old days, before 5.6, if you had a new box coming online, you did like a MySQL dump to it and started it up, and then you went and saw where the master log file was, what position it was, and you go to the slave and say, okay, that's this position, and you had to kind of sync up between the two. With GTIDs, you say, here's the master, start at GTID number 1 and work your way up, away you go. Better to automate and a lot nicer to handle. And it also saves your sanity, because it's kind of hard on the phone on a weekend trying to talk to a junior DBA who's trying to bring the stuff up and he doesn't quite understand log positions. You can just give him this. Something else we started doing in 5.6 is, instead of storing the replication information into an actual file, we store it in a database table. Well, why is this important? The InnoDB storage engine knows how to rebuild itself after a crash. Things like MyISAM and general log files, it may not recover right. It often won't. So what happens with an InnoDB storage of all your replication data, InnoDB goes to rebuild itself, it gets everything up to sync, and away you go. Life's much easier. With 5.7, we're going to have multi-source replication, So you can fan a whole bunch of different boxes into one for backup purposes. If you have sharded data and the edges of the shards don't overlap, you can have one shard copied into one place for a big backup. Every show I get asked by a couple people about multi-master replication. Officially, we don't recommend it. A lot of people do it. The idea is you have one server doing the key incrementals on the evens, another one doing it on the odds, and you can kind of get two masters going at the same time. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of effort and you need to watch it. If you're in a big Oracle database shop, and occasionally there's one person in a crowd this size that just happens to be at a big shop that's 90% Oracle and their 10% is the rest. You can back up MySQL to the big STP backup devices. These are huge, nasty devices that back up lots of stuff. You can also take advantage of the Oracle Database Firewall and the Audit Vault. If you have the enterprise subscription to MySQL, the audit data comes in an easy-to-read XML format for easy parsing. So how do you do backup with replication? Replication basically has three threads. One's the general communication from the master to the slave, which is actually the slave initiating to read the log, the slave to its own copy of the log, and then the log into the database. What you do is you shut down the communications to the, shut down log to data thread, which should be, basically you can turn off the stuff where it goes to log to the data. What happens is it still pulls stuff from the master, and it writes it in its copy of the log, but it doesn't get put out to the database. At that time, you can flush your tables and do a backup, and you have a good, consistent, time-sensitive backup. And then once you're ready to go, start this thread again, away you go. Okay, tools will make life easier. I know if you've been around a database for a while, you probably have your own set of tools that you like, and we can talk about those later. The first class I'd like to talk about of tools is monitoring. Yes, you need to monitor, and yes, you need to pay attention to your monitor. There are also tools for various administrational functions. I'm a dinosaur. I learned to do everything by typing or by hand. I don't do that anymore. I use something called MySQL Workbench, which I can demo later. Something else you need to do is get some documentation on your instances and make sure you document your backup and restoration procedures. Okay, active monitoring. This is something that's going to watch what's going on in your database and actively tell you, hey, pay attention to this. It might be with MySQL Enterprise Monitor. It's going to be a message saying, hey, this buffer cache is too small. You need to crank it up a little bit. Something like Nagios or Cacti, it might be a page or an email saying, gee, you're running out of log space. You need to do something. Once you get these messages, you have to pay attention and act on them. If you're in the Nagios Cacti world, Percona has some wonderful plugins that do wonderful things. If you can afford support from MySQL, I really recommend the Enterprise Monitor. It's a great tool. Lets you have playback ability, so if you go back through the logs and you see there's a spike in the middle of the night, you can mouse over that and zoom in and see what's going on. Okay, semi-active monitoring. These are things like PHP-MyAdmin, MySQL Workbench, to some extent Monyog and other stuff. What I really like about Workbench versus saying like the approach of PHP-MyAdmin, PHP-MyAdmin hangs off your website. There's script kiddies out there that are always searching on how to break into your box, and they're going to eventually figure out where your PHP-MyAdmin is, and then they'll start working on how to get through that. Workbench is a standalone application. Remember, the first time you see a problem, you're only seeing a small part of it. And without monitoring, you don't know if that's just a set of ears, eyes, and nose in the water, or if there's actually a hippo under there. So Workbench, it's a Swiss Army tool of stuff. It has tools for doing queries, administration. If you have to add users to MySQL and you're not a regular DBA, this is the easiest way to do stuff. MySQL does not have the concept of roles. Workbench sort of does. You hit one checkbox and it will say, okay, this person can do backups and updates and create new users. Lockdown stuff. The other thing, it has access to the sys schema, which is a bunch of views and procedures built on top of the information schema and the performance schema to let you see the equivalent of the Oracle $$ variables. In the past, you couldn't dig down low enough to figure out who was hogging your resources. With this, you can find out what queries aren't using indexes, what indexes aren't being used, who's hogging your I/O, who's hogging your memory, all the normal stuff that you want to know when you think things are going wrong with the database. It also has an entity relationship mapper, so if you have a database you don't understand, you can get a big printout of how the various tables are built and how they interact with each other. It also has a great migration tool, so if you have to port from another database. and it does about 20 other things. Also with Workbench, and you can use these standalone, are the MySQL utilities, and we are hiring Python coders. They're written in Python, easy to extend, and they have a whole bunch of different functions. My favorite is you have a master, a whole bunch of bright boxes you just brought in, copy everything off the master on these boxes, set up replication. Something happens to the master, one of the slaves will take over automatically. You can copy user settings between instances. So if you're figuring out why Joe, who's great in prod but not in prod but not real life, why his settings are different, you can copy that over. You can look for bad processes and kill them. You can move binary logs. If you have a column out there somewhere that's called private_inf, but you don't remember what table or what database is in, it will go out and grep that for you. There's about 28 of these various utilities out there, and they're great. Please use them. Also with those, use the Percona toolkit. Toolkits has a bunch of various functions that will go out there and make your life easier. How to describe a toolbox full of tools? It's great, it's free, and it will save your butt. If you're an old-time SQL folk, Toad is out there for MySQL now. I think it's in its final beta. Somehow it ended up at Dell. And of course, hopefully later you folks will share some tools that you like. Okay, config suggestions. As I mentioned earlier, turn off DNS notifications unless you have a handy-dandy close-by DNS that's going to resolve for all your local boxes, and no one's ever going to screw it up. How many here understand how a database optimizer works? It's basically a very stupid GPS. You say you want column A from table A, column B from table B, and column C from table B. It thinks, okay, I have 1 to the 2 to the 3 factorial number of routes to figure out which way to organize this stuff. And like a GPS, if it doesn't know that the on-ramp down the street isn't there anymore, it's going to try it. MySQL, you can't tie down the query plan. You can in Oracle, DBT, other databases. Every time MySQL sees a query, it wants to try to optimize it again. So, to help the optimizer, we save statistics on how things were gathered in the past. The fast way is to turn right on La Cienega, not left on La Cienega. So we keep that around in statistics. So, when you reboot a server before 5.6, you lost those statistics, which means you brought up the server again. It didn't know that you didn't want to do a right turn, so it would try a right turn. So now we have ways to save those statistics. You can read all about it in section 14, 13, 16.1. It's actually a very good read. By turning on these switches, and by the way, the slides are available at slideshare.net/Dave Stokes. They'll be on the last slide. You can bring up the box and bring down the box and save your statistics. It makes life much, much easier for you. With 5.7, you'll have the ability to tune the level of log detail you get on the fly. So if something starts going wrong and you just have the most restrictive, which would be errors, you can now turn it on and get warnings, and also, if you're really paranoid, get the warnings in the notes. If it's something else not going on, you turn it back off. The other option we have is that if you have tools that really are good at processing syslog, you can now send the output to syslog. Other recommendation, query cache. In the past, everyone liked the MySQL query cache. If you ran a query in the past, what would happen is it would save a hash of that query. You resubmit that query, it takes a hash of the new query, sees that it has that hash in the old query cache. Aha, I don't have to run it again because I have the output saved someplace else. Great idea. Big problem. Single-threaded. So what we're asking people to do is that if you really have the same query running over and over and over again, and not a variation of it, the same query, throw it in a caching layer. Throw it in Redis. Throw it in Memcache. throw it in memcache D. Turn off the query cache and give that memory to the main process. The other big tuning hint I have for 99% of you, out of the box, set your InnoDB buffer pool size to 75 to 85% of RAM. Turn on this stuff here and the skip name resolve, whatever you need for replication, and that's it. This will get you within 10-15% of optimal performance in most cases. It's that simple. Okay, I also have some big hints for you. These aren't I won't say they're strong recommendations, but if I could order you folks to do this, these would be the orders. First, be damn stingy handing out permissions. As I say here, it's easier to say no than to constantly be restoring. Any DBA with gray hair will tell you about the person they gave full permissions to against their better judgment who wiped out things 2, 3, 4, or 5 times. If you have a manager / idiot on your staff, add safe updates or I am a dummy to their .my.cnf file. What that means is they can't run a query that's going to affect a lot of records without a where clause. What that means is they can't go, oh, I want to delete Joe's record, so delete from employees where employee equals Joe. They just say, oh, delete from employee, hit return, and suddenly all the employees are gone. Other things coming in 5.7 is you have the ability in their my.cnf file or on a session variable to give them a maximum execution time for a query. So if your boss is the guy who wants to go out and run the stats at Friday when you're trying to run payroll, you can limit him to 60 seconds. Hint number 2. With 5.6, the performance schema and the information schema took somewhere between 6 and 10% of the system resources for overhead. With 5.7, it looks like it's going to be somewhere in the 2.5 to 3% range. There's a lot of valuable information in there. The best way to look at that valuable information is with the sys schema, usually through MySQL Workbench. If you're having trouble, if you're suspecting trouble, if you have the merest hint anything's going wrong, learn to use the sys schema. It will tell you who's doing what to whom. Big hint number 3. When 5.7 comes out, the default installation is going to be secure. There's no more throwing up a 5.6 instance in the cloud, and before you get to it, somebody's discovered, oh, the root account doesn't have a password, or there's an anonymous account out there, or there's a test database with a root account with no password on there, and the script kiddies go wild with your new instance. 5.7 is going to be locked down. You're going to have a root password forced on you. After you install it, it will tell you the root password's in /root/tilde/MySQL_secret. It's a randomly generated password. There's no way anyone's going to guess how to get into your new instance. We take away the anonymous account, and no more test DB. If you want to test DB, you can load it later. We're trying to lock things down. We also have ways to rotate passwords. So if your company has a mandate on everyone must change every X days, you can do that. If they say you need 1 uppercase letter, 1 special character, no shorter than 8 characters, you can enforce that. Or if you really want, you can turn it off. We also go to strict mode for the default SQL mode. In the past, people used to say, MySQL is a toy database because I can put in 000-00-00 for a date, or I can drop a 32-character value into a 30-character column, and I just get a warning or may not even get a warning. Well, that's because we were running in a very open SQL mode. By now, default is going to be strict with 5.7. If you're running WordPress, that will bite you in the butt. You'll have to change the default SQL mode. It's 1 statement in the configuration file. Also, Derhans was talking about passwords. A lot of people will put them in their tilde.mycnf. They'll put them in their bash RC. They'll put them someplace else. That's great, but someone goes snooping at the wrong time on the wrong terminal while you're running down the hall to take care of something else, and suddenly they have your password. Or you work in a facility where they have very strict rules about that stuff. We now have something called the MySQL config editor that's been around since 5.6.6. What it is you say, okay, I want to set up an encrypted password for this account on that box. And you use this editor and it will set it up for you. Your password is encrypted. Your credentials are encrypted. And when you go to log in now, you'll type in MySQL minus login.path and whatever alias you set up for the box and password that you want. No more clear text anywhere. Okay. This is the Q&A part. Oh, I already lost somebody. Oh, you're going to take a seat so the... Oh, okay. Once again, if you want the copy of the slides, make sure they get to the SCaLE folks. My Twitter handle is @Stoker. My email is davidstokes@oracle.com. That's my blog address. And I'd like to hear what other things other folks who are taking care of databases have to say. And by the way, if you participate, and you're one of the first 6 participants, so, yes, sir.
I ran into this once. Is there any chance they're going to ever increase the size of usernames in the MySQL database from 16 to...
I saw that on Friday, and I was thinking, I've been meaning to ask the developers about that for a long time. I will go out and find out. My guess is it's probably something hard-coded somewhere that we need to get the chisel out and hammer away. Yeah. And, of course, the next thing is, gee, are you going to support GUIDs for login names? I don't know.
I'll just deal with it.
Yeah.
MySQL documentation says it's hard-coded. You can go change it if you want to, and you will regret it.
Yes.
And it's hard-coded multiple places, and every time I look at it, I just
Yeah.
walk around for a while.
Yeah. Any? Yes, sir. Yes. There are some things that we have for enterprise customers that are closer to what you're talking about. We also have documentation on how to roll your own. You can, again, authenticate against Kerberos. There's other things out there. God, I'm trying to remember the other name. If you look at the authentication plugin that we have, there's all sorts of ways of doing that. The other thing you can do is have proxy accounts. So if you have an accounting team and you don't want to go out and add accounts for every time there's a new hire in accounting, especially with tax season coming up and they're going to add 30 bodies and you don't want to add 30 accounts, you can set up proxy logins too. Yes, ma'am.
Do you not recommend multi-master? Is that only for multi-active master? Also, is there something up with active passive? I didn't really see.
With MySQL cluster, active, master is great. Standard MySQL, I don't really recommend it. Are there people doing it? Yeah. Are there?
Active passive?
Active passive I like, but when they try to go active acted, that's when things start getting scary. Yes, sir.
Is there any recommendation, and I guess this may vary depending on what the applications are, but for a single MySQL instance, how many databases you can stick in one before trying to separate them out?
The maximum number of databases you can stick. Yeah.
I guess not maximum, but like, is there kind of a recommendation?
There's really no recommendation on how much you put in there. You're probably going to run out of disk space and typing effort before you actually run out of.
In terms of like, if you're running different applications, maybe one web application over here and another one over there.
It depends on your use. A lot of folks will also use the one table InnoDB setting so that every file is its own individual thing instead of being one big InnoDB blob type structure. It depends on your use in your application.
So if they're both very heavy, then you may want to split them out.
If they're both very heavy, you might want to, yeah. One thing about databases, they don't play well with other things. They also don't play well with each other. So once they get to a certain level, it's kind of easier to move them away from each other.
And when you're splitting out things into different instances, is it a better idea to put those instances on different machines, or just have multiple instances on the same machine?
Machines have gotten so incredibly cheap, it's easier just to throw them out on their own instance. Yeah.
So it's not really worth it to stick
The-
them on.
You can make your own AWS if you want to,
Yeah.
but it depends on how. Yes, sir. You had a. So PAM, Kerberos, Windows, and LDAP. And we also have examples in there how to roll your own. And we're going to have some security announcements coming up in 2 months. So please watch out for those. I can't talk to them, but they're coming up. Yes, sir. Yes. I think there is, but I haven't done it. If you go out to the forms.mysql website and go into the appropriate form for that and ask that, they'll be able to give you examples, chapter and verse on how to do that. I'm pretty sure you can do that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I would have brought more of the stuffed little dolphins, but I got hit by the Girl Scouts yesterday. Talk about the cookie mafia. Yes, sir. I think it's called MySQL something grep under the MySQL utilities. Oh, the Enterprise Monitor. The other fun thing, it's MySQL Enterprise Monitor has a whole bunch of things. It actually will analyze queries for you. It will monitor what's going on. It will monitor multiple instances. Most things like PHP MyAdmin and Workbench are designed for looking at one system at a time. Enterprise Monitor is designed to look at a range of them. If you are curious about what the people who pay for subscriptions get, it's free for 30 days from edelivery.oracle.com. I've known several people who have gone out there and said, I have a problem, downloaded the software, figured out what the problem is, and turned it off. So there's no time bombs in there, but it's good free for 30 days. So anyone else have a favorite tool, toy, suggestion? Boy, you're a quiet bunch. It really is the last day of the show. Well, thank you all for coming out. If you have any questions, I'll be around for a little bit. And have a great rest of the show, and I'll see you next year.
There's an interesting tool that one of the presentation was for Apache Ignite.
Uh-huh.